In this video, we'll be teaching you all the important parts of Valorant aim and what's the best way to improve each of them. What's going on, guys? It's Sergeant Frost, and welcome back to the second episode of Noob to Pro. In today's episode, we're breaking down aim. How should you think about aim in Valorant? And what can you do to improve it? As always, there will be timestamps in the description below, so you can fast forward or look back to any parts you may find interesting in particular. But for this episode especially, we really recommend watching it in full without skipping any parts. Aim in Valorant exists out of different parts, and understanding each of them is super important if you want to improve the fastest and not get stuck because you might have missed one crucial thing. So without further ado, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Starting with the absolute basics, Valorant has low time to kill. Oftentimes, you can end someone's round in just a single bullet. That's what makes it so that aim is very crucial, but also comes in short bursts. You won't have to consistently track a player for 10 seconds, but being the first to shoot and landing a headshot is important. Headshots deal 4 times the damage of body shots, and leg shots deal even less, so clicking heads is the name of the game. On top of that, Valorant has movement and accuracy. If you're moving, your gun is not accurate, and even if you aren't on someone, they probably won't die. So basically, stand still, click heads, and you win. Other than that, aim in Valorant can be separated in 3 rough categories. You have raw aim, your ability to move your crosshair from point A to point B quickly and precisely. Then you have weapon mechanics, knowing how your gun acts when you shoot it. Should you shoot full auto? Should you fire slower? How quickly can you shoot? And lastly, an aspect that's not crucial to most other games but absolutely fundamental for Valorant is crosshair placement. Where do you put your crosshair before, after, and in between fights? So let's start with that first. Crosshair placement, as the name suggests, is just where you leave your crosshair at all times. Aiming in Valorant is hard, not because targets move very fast or their hitboxes are very small, but rather because aiming for the head is so important and whoever shoots first usually wins. Because of that fact, being the first to fire an accurate shot should be your goal basically always. To do that, being ready for engagements before they even happen is important. When you're going to peek someone's showers, you can of course just turn the corner blindly and use your raw aim to flick to wherever your opponent might be standing. But you can also try to pre-aim the angles at head level and peek the angles one by one. This way, you're not only making life easier for yourself as you won't have to hit any flick shots, which can be pretty hard. But since you have to adjust your aim less, you're also faster, so you're more likely to shoot first. Why is crosshair placement so important? That's kind of the idea of crosshair placement. You make raw aim less important. And even if you do have to use raw aim, you'll have to make smaller adjustments that are both easier and faster to execute. Crosshair placement is important for more than just peeking angles though. In fact, you should be mindful about it throughout the entire game. When you're holding angles, you should pre-place your crosshair at head level so you can react more quickly. And when you're just running around the map, same thing applies. Always have your crosshair around the corners at headshot height so that if an enemy pops out on screen, you'll only have to do minimal aiming and can hopefully be faster than your opponent. How do you practice crosshair placement? Obtaining good crosshair placement requires more than concept knowledge though. You'll definitely have to practice it, something that can be done very effectively in a deathmatch. When first practicing crosshair placement, don't be too hard on yourself. Just try to keep your crosshair at head level at all times. Look at the terrain and place your crosshair at meaningful angles. In deathmatch, there's lots of opponents to reference the correct height from, and you don't have to stress about winning or losing, which then allows you to spend some time focusing on that aspect solely, so you'll quickly get a feel for it. Once you do, you can move on to the next step. That's taking into account your reaction time. If your reactions are quick, you can place your crosshair closer to walls when you're tracing them, or holding an angle. But if they're slower, you should place your crosshair further away. That way, you give yourself enough time to react to people peeking you and you won't have to make as big of an adjustment. I should mention, however, that most people tend to overestimate their reactive capabilities, so they place it too close. If you want to be sure, you can hop in a deathmatch, record yourself playing, and see if you're putting it too close or too far. If you're a bit lazy like me, you might think it's okay to do it in-game, but it's very hard to reflect fairly while also trying to headshot people, so recording is definitely the better option. Then of course you have the actual aiming part, or raw aim how most players like to refer to it. Raw aim is really just your ability to move your mouse and crosshair from point A to point B, and doing that as quickly and precisely as possible. It depends on important things like your mouse control, reaction speed, and even vision. It's hand-eye coordination. Practicing this is more difficult since doing it within Valorant is not very efficient. Why? Well, like I mentioned before, in a game like Valorant, aim is important, but it comes in short bursts. Fights take a couple seconds max, so most of the time you spend playing, you're not really even aiming. And that goes for even fast-paced game modes like Deathmatch. But that doesn't mean it's not important to practice. Even if your crosshair placement is near perfect, there's gonna be some situations where you're gonna have to rely on your aim to bail you out. The fundamentals are of course hugely important: crosshair placement, positioning, and game sense. But by having worse aim, you will highly limit yourself, particularly in lower ranks. If your aim is limited, you need to rely more heavily on very good crosshair placement and clean peeks. You want to hit your first shot, or you want to catch your enemies off guard. You should thus play around your utility well and try to outsmart your opponents. If your aim is better, however, the game is more forgiving. You can win most 50-50 duels and it's easier to play in clutches. You can decide to take a fight instead of planning on a way to surprise your opponents. And whenever things get chaotic or are more unstructured, aim also becomes increasingly important, so you're more likely to be successful there. Basically, it just makes life easier, allows you to find more impact, and enables you to capitalize on enemies' mistakes. How do you improve your raw aim? So the way you work on raw aim is through aim trainers like AimLab. AimLab is a free aim training tool that offers you many different aiming scenarios, each focusing on different parts of your aiming mechanics. Once you get in, you can head over to the training tab, and there you'll find both game and skill specific scenarios. Using these tabs is a great way to get familiar with AimLab and the kind of scenarios that you can practice. But if you're really not sure what to look for, fear not, we've got some suggestions. For absolute beginners, it might be best to stick with some of the playlists AimLab themselves have developed for Valorant, like Valorant Fundamentals Training. This playlist allows you to get grips with basic mouse control, but it isn't very challenging since targets are fairly large. So for a more realistic playlist with smaller targets, more comparable to heads in Valorant, we recommend Voltaic Valorant Warm-Up. This playlist is really good for beginner to intermediate players, and it serves both as a good warm-up as well as a general practice playlist. It's short at only 10 minutes, but it can be put on loop if you want to practice for longer. For more challenges or perhaps just to try more scenarios, there are also 30-minute playlists that focuses on flicks and accuracy on small stationary targets, which is an important skill for Valorant. This playlist is called Voltaic Static Clicking Balanced, and it is a good playlist to train Valorant aim specifically. The link is in the description. Some of you might also want to try working on your overall aiming skills, not just Valorant specific skills. For that, you should try doing the Voltaic Fundamentals Iron. This is an hour-long playlist that allows you to work on all different aspects of aim. I should mention that the Iron playlist is the lowest difficulty, so it's a good starting point. But if you find it to be too easy, you can also move on to the Bronze, Silver, or maybe even Gold playlist depending on your skill level. Don't rush yourself though, scenarios should be challenging but not overly difficult. You're trying to get better, not force yourself to aim like 10s on day 1. Overall, AimLab is just a really great tool to work on your aim. It's super efficient and allows you to increase or decrease difficulty depending on your current skill. If getting better at Valorant is a goal for you, it's a good idea to put aside 30 to 90 minutes a day to training your raw aiming skills. Now for the final aspect of your Valorant aim, weapon mechanics. Weapon mechanics really comes down to understanding the guns you use in game and knowing how to use them. This is the aspect that's probably the easiest part to get down and can be easily trained in deathmatch. First, a couple things to note. Of course, with all guns, it's important to be stationary while shooting. Although there are some exceptions in the pistols and SMGs which are actually quite okay to use while moving, at least at very close range. They'll still lose their accuracy, but it's not as severe as other guns. So if you're close to someone and have a Spectre, don't be too worried about your movement. Then you should also note that weapon sprays are somewhat unpredictable. The first 10 or so bullets are a set spray, but after that it's random and the guns become very hard to control. This means that you basically always want to kill people with your first couple of bullets. There's not a whole lot of room for error. Like that there's 3 parts of aiming, there's also 3 shooting styles: spraying, bursting, and tapping. Spraying is simply holding down your mouse button and firing full auto. This style is hard to control but can be very good when enemies are close up and accuracy is less important. You also have tapping. This is a style that should only really be done when you have very little bullets in your gun or enemies are at extremely long range. It's firing bullets one by one so that each individual bullet is accurate and you have the best chance of hitting individual shots. And then you have bursting, the happy medium between the two. Bursting is a spray-tap hybrid. You fire short sprays of 3 to 8 bullets depending on the range so that you can fire both many shots and also remain in control of where your bullets are going. Because of Valorant's mechanics though, and the fact that most engagements are roughly at medium range, you basically want to be bursting 90% of the time, and you barely ever use spraying or tapping. If you miss your initial burst, there's no need to panic. Let the accuracy reset and try again. So to practice this, you again should be going into a deathmatch where you can freely work on your shooting style. If people are very close, you can spray or burst, and the further away people are, the shorter you should make your bursts. You'll quickly notice what shooting styles are good at different ranges, how long you should make your bursts, and also what you yourself prefer. This is what deathmatch is really good for. In a program like AimLab, you of course don't have to account for your weapon inaccuracy or your sprays, so that's where deathmatch comes in. You play AimLab for raw mechanics, and you use tools like deathmatch and the range to get a feel for your guns. Doing that, you'll be using your time most efficiently, meaning you should see maximum results. And that's all there is to it. You should now have a good idea of what Valorant aim looks like and the best steps you can take to work on it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of Noob to Pro.